Well, everyone, the day's finally arrived. It's the 2-year anniversary of Red Right to Left. Yay! Yes, 2 years ago when I was but a teenager, I posted my first video to YouTube. Last year at this time I was in the midst of one of my all too common video droughts, so I didn't have anything to say about the 1-year anniversary of the show. Which is why I'm making up for it this time around. My first ever video dealt with The Prince of Tennis, a series that I've revisited a couple of times and which I'll be finishing at some point. I'm not going to touch it this episode, however. Instead, we'll be looking at another shonen sports manga that deals with the game of tennis, one suggested to me by a member of the forums. The only question is it an improvement over The Prince of Tennis, or will I have to gouge my eyes out by the end of this review and eat them? Well, only one way to find out, and that's by reading Baby Steps from Right to Left. I don't think I've ever come across a shonen sports manga authored by a woman before, but Baby Steps is such a series, penned by Kichiki Hikaru. This does show in the illustrations to some extent. Like you'd expect from a shonen series, most male characters have distinct hairstyles and sharp-looking eyes, and the action scenes are full of well-defined movement. But some of the character designs convey the sort of softness you'd usually see in a shoujo manga, and the female lead's hairstyle sort of reminds me of Mizuki from Hanakimi. And that's kind of all I have to say about the artwork. The more I do this show, the more I realize how very little I know about art. Our main character is Maruo Eiichiro, commonly known by his peers as A-chan. A-chan is sort of borderline OCD, and he tries to lead his life in an orderly and routine manner. He's a very studious person, but more so than that, he has a habit of taking incredibly detailed, incredibly neat notes, so he's teased frequently, but his classmates also tend to borrow his notes a lot. On a friend's suggestion, the school idol Takasaki Natsu borrows notes from A-chan, and our two leads are introduced to one another. The dynamic between the two is established very quickly. A-chan is uptight and lacks confidence in social situations, while Natsu is so friendly and laid back that others sort of melt around her personality. Wait. I'm sorry. I'm barely 15 pages into this series. That's like barely a fifth of the way through the first chapter, and already I'm in love with this manga. Already we've been told who our protagonist is, what's unique about him, what his shortcomings are, how he interacts with his friends and with strangers, and most of that's also been known with the female lead. It's a really amusing manga too, full of quick jokes and flashes of a cutesier art style to provide visual humor. Looking good so far, but I have yet to see any X-ray vision, golden arm weights, or swords that can crucify people. How can I even be sure that this is a tennis manga at all? At this point, it's still early in the school year, and A-chan decides that since he's got one free afternoon in his weekly study schedule, that he can spend the time getting some exercise. And his mom suggests, and when that fails insists, that he check out the local tennis club. And who else should he run into there but Natsu? A-chan decides the club seems like the perfect place to get exercise, since the facility is used by people of all different levels of skill. But unfortunately, the poor kid's so out of shape that he collapses in exhaustion during his first warm-up. Good lord, I think at that point even if your instructor was Barney the dinosaur, he'd say you suck. Thoroughly embarrassed, A-chan tries to sneak out, but Natsu runs into him before he can get away. They converse for a bit, get to know each other, and we the readers get to learn just how different they are. A-chan explains that the reason he's so anal in his note-taking has nothing to do with enthusiasm for schoolwork. He just doesn't have any confidence in his own talents, and figures he won't be prepared for exams unless he works hard and studies a little at a time. On the other hand, Natsu is incredibly passionate about playing tennis, and even has aspirations of one day playing professionally. Yeah, something you might not know if all your tennis knowledge came from a certain other manga series is that women can play the game too. And thank God for that. A-chan is sort of drawn back to the gym by Natsu's enthusiasm, and once he actually gets to hold a racket and hit a tennis ball, lo and behold, he decides he really likes it. And all it takes for him to get hooked is to get lucky and make a single perfect stroke, which prompts him to spend hours trying to replicate it. And now that our hero has discovered this incredible sport, it's time for him to take the tennis world by storm. Sort of. Yeah, so at first A-Chan gets his butt handed to him by players gifted with far more talent and years more experience. But in the style of so many other sports stories, he perseveres through these early defeats and works tirelessly to improve himself. Of course, he doesn't get spectacular overnight, but instead takes a similar approach to improving his tennis skills as he does with his schoolwork, perhaps a bit too similar. Taking advantage of the tennis club's facilities, he receives encouragement and advice from Natsu, instruction and guidance from the coach, and practice matches and tough love from the slightly older Egawa Takuma. Over the course of days, weeks, and months, Eiichiro improves in baby steps, and eventually becomes a formidable player. He even discovers a special talent of his own, which allows him to play tennis with his own unique style. On the surface, it's a very basic premise. The awkward misfit discovers an activity that he really enjoys and wants to excel in, goes through many trials and tribulations to become the best. Cookie-cutter shonen story. But hey, it beats the story about the prodigy who breezes through every opponent he comes across and gets magical power-ups instead of having to work for his victories. So yeah, the plot's cliché. Most of the supporting characters are cliché too. Takuma is your typical grumpy anti-hero, the coaches are coaches, and the comic relief characters are only good for a few cheap laughs. Thankfully, Natsu is a breath of fresh air whenever she appears, and many of Eiichiro's opponents have some pretty weird personality quirks which, while not being over the top, make them stand out from the crowd. And maybe the supporting cast fleshes out later on in the series, but I haven't gotten to read too far into it, for reasons I'll explain later. Baby Steps is not a spectacular, one-of-a-kind series, but it's a pretty damn good sports manga anyway. The action is easy to follow, and you can really feel Eiichiro's desperation whenever he lands in a tough situation. The rules of tennis are laid out in a basic but very informative manner, as are the techniques that the players use. Eiichiro is a charming character, and you really want to root for him as time goes on. In short, yeah, it's a basic series and it doesn't really do anything different, but it's just a fun, well-written manga, and I can't get enough of it. Now I know what you're thinking. Why does it sound like I'm wrapping up already? Surely I have more to say about this series. Well, the reason for the brevity today is twofold. For one thing, usually I have much more to say about things that I hate as opposed to things I enjoy. And secondly, I can't speak Japanese. In spite of having run continuously for over 3 years and counting, Baby Steps has yet to be licensed for translation. As such, the only ways to read the series are to read the original Japanese version, or to track down the chapters that have been translated by fans. Even if you decide to do the latter, only 4 volumes have been translated, and the series to date spans a whole 14 volumes. And for all I know, those other 10 volumes are absolute crap, though I highly doubt it. So yeah, I'd love to tell you to go out and enjoy this series and support it, but you can't really unless you're bilingual. And unfortunately, there's no guarantee that Baby Steps will ever be licensed. There seems to be a real lack of translated sports manga. I mean, what's out there other than Slam Dunk, Prince of Tennis, and Ice Shield 21? Besides Baby Steps, there are at least 3 other sports manga running in Weekly Shonen Magazine, all of which have been running at least 6 years. Hell, Hajime no Ippo's been running for almost as long as I've been alive. And yet somehow Air Gear and Rave Master did get licensed from the same magazine? I don't know how the hell that happened. Hell, putting aside Weekly Shonen Magazine titles, what about Captain Tsubasa? That franchise has been around for 30 years now, and yet it's never been brought to the English-speaking world? I guess licensors just don't think there's much of an overlap between sports enthusiasts and otaku. Can't imagine why.
Hold on to it! Shoot it! 4-3! Go!
Personally, thought this week was a great chapter. Luffy was awesomely hilarious.
Defend like you got a pair. Fucking hell.
Nice to see Usopp got a chance to be awesome, but Zoro is the most badass as usual.
Get in! He's bang that in, Mackie!
Wonder how long it will take for the giant mermaid to be Rule 34'd. LOL.
Don't get it done!
Yeah. So anyway, I love Baby Steps even if it may never reach American soil. That does it for today, so until next time, forget what they taught you in school, always read right to left.